And we continue now looking at South Africa's fight against corruption. Of course, as you hear from Lawson, there are different parts that are needed in this particular conversation around corruption, around the fight against corruption. You do need law enforcement, you do need whistleblowers, you do need the NPA. You also do need, strategies that are put in place by different, arms of government, different departments. You also look at what the Zondo Commission, reports had to say, for example, even about the role of Parliament as well when it comes to the issue of corruption and addressing some of the issues around accountability. But let's stay with the subject and we speak now to Karam Singh, who is the Executive Director at Corruption Watch. Karam, thank you so much. Always a pleasure to speak to you. I mean, you say, and I was reading your op-ed and quite hard-hitting, you're saying that the South Africa's fight against corruption has lacked commitment and courageous leadership with the mindset of enough is enough. What is the one thing for you that makes you feel so strongly about this?
Thank you so much for having me on the program, and thanks for having this this debate. I listened to your interview earlier with Lawson Naidu, and I think what I'm trying to say in the op-ed and to say generally is that it's been a mixed bag. I think the bar was raised very high by the administration, the Ramaphosa administration, when they came in and said there would be a new dawn. We were turning a corner against a very long and difficult period of state capture. And I think what they had to deal with in terms of, getting back to a place where we're moving in the right direction has been really challenging. There's been challenges around closing the accountability deficit. So, if we look at the success of the Zondo Commission, it was fantastic that it was able to do the work that it did, that it was able to give us this record. But even Judge Zondo said I was only able to deal with a small percent of the allegations that were brought to me. And then the question is, what happens after the commission? Where's the accountability? Are we recovering stolen assets? Are we pursuing successful prosecutions? Are people being blacklisted who are implicated, who are dodgy service providers? I think there has been some success. There has been some asset recovery. It's significant that the state capture cases have been enrolled. And the debate you had about the NPA is a challenging one. So, we don't want to say that there hasn't been any progress. It's just, I think there's this thirst that it needs to be more driven, more focused, and bolder ultimately in terms of putting the interests of the country ahead of the interests of party political interests.
Karam, one thing that the president said at some point was that the issue of corruption must be one that is fought with intensity and much focus, just like the country is fighting against poverty, issues around crime and inequality. Has there been this intensity though when you look at the fight against corruption?
I think that's where one feels a bit of frustration. If we look at the response to load shedding and the response to the challenges at Eskom, we got a dedicated minister that was looking at the issue now in a focused way. I don't feel that we've ever had that kind of dedicated leadership since the dissolution of the Scorpions to say, this is the lead person on anti-corruption. This is the main agency that's driving the anti-corruption agenda. We've seen great leadership from the SIU. We see the president say the right things at the State of the Nation. But in terms of him being out in front of the issue of corruption to say it's a zero tolerance situation, my administration is going to rise and fall based upon how we're dealing with corruption, I don't think we've seen that. And I don't think we've seen the focus and the dedication to say we're going to let the chips fall where they may. If they're implicated comrades, they're going to be asked to move aside. The fact that the speaker was able to keep her position for as long as she had when, there were these allegations speaks to the type of complicity in some ways the administration has had in protecting certain people. And we know that, they're implicated people that reside in the cabinet. And I think things like that really have sent the wrong message.
When you look at, the fact that you look at, for example, the Corruption Perception Index, for example, you look at the grey list by the Financial Action Task Force, how much of this as well hurts our reputation or even perception globally?
I think, perception is, it's not a completely scientific, it's not completely objective. If you look at South Africa's score in terms of the corruption perception index, it's kind of flatlined over the years. It hasn't really gone up too much and it hasn't gone down too far. So there's this kind of sense that there is a stagnation. In terms of the grey listing and the Financial Action Task Force, I think that's really significant that an international body like that says that South Africa's got this significant vulnerability when it comes to illicit financial flows and money laundering. South Africa's not alone in getting this designation, but I think that does point to the challenges within the global community. But if those perceptions were not matched by the perception on the street, then we would have a problem. But if you were to go to the common person in South Africa and say, how do you feel about corruption? Do you feel that we're going in the right direction? I think there would be a pessimism. And I think that will translate into how people think about how they should approach the coming polls.
Are we taking those, thoughts by individuals, the ordinary South Africans, seriously?
No, in many ways we're not, because in a lot of cases, their voices are not properly escalated, So if it comes to what's happening in local municipalities, what's happening in rural areas, what's happening in schools, there's a lot of corruption out there and a lot of abuse of power, abuse of resources, which is not fully surfaced. We know from the Auditor General's reports we have this major challenge at local government, but in terms of the common man's challenges of corruption, it doesn't always come to the surface. It's not necessarily what makes the headlines.
And what does it do then, Karam, in your view, to the mindset of the ordinary South African as they approach these polls then?
Well, I think the question they need to ask is, what's the track record of the governing party? Can they trust the governing party when it talks about corruption? What mechanisms are going to be put in place to ensure that we do better? And then when it comes to the opposition parties, are they just blowing hot air on corruption, or are they taking principled stands? Are they putting forth detailed positions which the electorate can rely and trust? If you look at all of the party manifestos, they all talk about anti-corruption in different ways, but the parties do frame it differently. And I think it's important that we engage now in a civic and voter education process, so the public knows what they're in for when they vote for different parties.
Karam, thank you so much for your time. Do appreciate it. That is Karam Singh, the Corruption Watch's Executive Director.